thanks for staying with us. This is still Enterprise Morning on Enterprise TV. About now, we want to take a look at our main conversation for the morning. Against the backdrop of the current hardship in the country, caused by inflation, the removal of fuel subsidies, and the exorbitant prices of foodstuffs and other basic services, youth and some traders on Monday took to major streets in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, to protest against the high cost of living in the country. You may want to recall that in the weeks gone by, similar protests had broken out in Kano and in Oshun, as well as in Niger State. Now, yesterday's demonstration began at about 11:15 a.m. as youths, traders, and other passers-by converged on the popular Mokola Roundabout and subsequently moved to as far as Sango en route the dual carriageway that leads to the University of Ibadan. All of this happened in Ibadan yesterday. The protesters were carrying placards, chanting solidarity songs to denounce what they termed the growing inflation and the dwindling purchasing power of the Naira, and of course, the extension, Nigerians. Now, this development, which caused a gridlock along Mokola Roundabout, Veterinary, Oremeji, and Sango neighborhoods, slowed down economic activities. As a matter of fact, the protesters displayed various placards to underscore the need for President Bola Tinubu and, of course, the federal government in general to do the needful to mitigate the spate of suffering and hardship across the land. I have with me in the studio for this segment Barrister Jido Logun. He's a face we are familiar with. He's a public affairs commentator, attorney at law, and of course, very cerebral in his insights on national issues. Barrister, welcome to the program today.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Yes, Barrister, this is not peculiar to Ibadan or to Oyo State for the matter. As a matter of fact, I think quite a number of well-to-do Nigerians have also begun to speak out and say, look, this is getting way beyond our means. How do you sum up everything happening in the country today?
Absolutely, it's hardship. And interestingly, this is not religion-driven. It's not ethnicity-driven. It's economically driven, and it reflects the state of our economy. And in business, we say this is consequence management, because we should have seen this coming. The issue of food scarcity and food crisis had been part of what we discussed in the past, looking at how the nation was moving economically, and of course the impact of the insecurity we have in the land, because if you don't produce enough to consume, it's a problem. And with the removal of the fuel subsidy and the attempt to regularize the foreign exchange windows that has made it to escalate so much, the purchasing powers of citizens has been grossly eroded. And the result can only be the hardship that we have now, and it's becoming unbearable for the citizens, because practically speaking, it's really, really, really tough. And we are beginning to have protests here and there. There was one in Niger State, there was one in Kano, that, is sending a signal out, and some opinion leaders have been throwing in their voices, like the Sultan of Sokoto and some notable Nigerians, that please, you have to do something quickly to tame this, because we are not talking of protests that are driven by political party affiliations now. So, and I can also let us know that the government is not just resting in one corner. The president had an emergency meeting with the governors. They discussed part of this. And again, I want to say that the federal government must design a mechanism to ensure that even though the states are autonomous, as long as they receive allocation from the federal government, they must be accountable. Because what we have read is that as part of the savings, from part of the savings from the removal of fuel subsidy, the allocations to states, have increased. So what are these states doing with this exactly with these allocations, except for the report we got from Borno State, the Governor Zulum, reportedly he has been engaging his own citizens by
Yes.
ensuring that the hardship is ameliorated. And I can also let us know that right now the prices of grains and food items are dropping in Taraba, in Kano, and in Kwara State and some other parts of the country because of the interventions of the state government by saying you cannot move this food out of here, and taming the smuggling of these products out of their states, and also combating those who
Yes.
were hoarding.
Yes. Sorry, I just wanted to cut in. Now, I'm glad you've mentioned intervention by the state governments. But again, if we just take one or two steps back, this is not a food crisis occasioned by flooding, occasioned by disaster, occasioned by the outbreak of a disease. This appears to be something that we brought upon ourselves. What's the guarantee that the original mistakes that led us here are gone for good? Even if some governors are now intervening here and there, what's the guarantee that whatever it is that brought us to this point is gone for good?
We need to be pragmatic and engage sustainable interventions. We need to become productive. And the first thing to do is go back to the primary purpose of government. If you check Section 14, subsection 2 of the Nigerian Constitution of 1999 as amended, it says that the security and the welfare of the citizens shall be the primary purpose of government. So let's assume Nigeria has been well secured. The farmers have been able to go and maximize the agroeconomy of the country. And we should have so much, because I read a report that even what we claim to have in the grain reserve is just theoretical, that it's not real. Then we can produce, there can be free movement of these products to parts of the country, and the purchasing power will be high. Imagine what the foreign exchange has done. And some will ask the question, what has foreign exchange got to do with farming?
Yes.
A lot. We live in a network of businesses. So if the pump price of petroleum, for instance, that you need to move these products around, it's about 700 naira in some locations. And you look at the incidental cost as they travel. Some of them we have to employ security agents to pilot them and stuff like that. By the time this food arrives destination, at what cost are they going to sell to consumers? So these are issues. So we need to secure the land. And from the example I gave in respect of Kano and some Taraba and some other states that are now trying to bring down the price of grains and foodstuff, can states now begin to engage the capacity for food production? I recall at a time Oyo State was in the
But we're not
production
seeing
of
this
tomato.
on an industrial scale. When there's an emergency, you would think that there will be, like they say, desperate times call for desperate measures. In the past, we saw Akwa Ibom come up with, was it pineapple at the time? Sorry, that was Cross River State, pineapple. Akwa Ibom, we understand they have some advantage in permanent production, even if it doesn't look like that's something that we need to do right now. We know that the Southwest used to be known for cocoa in those days. We've had the granite pyramids, we've had rice mills and things like that. But aren't you a bit embarrassed that in spite of these shortages and in spite of this mass hunger, undignified hunger, we are now seeing governments come out desperately, come out smoking out and saying, back to the farms, back to the farms. And there's no clarion call to anything.
The federal government reportedly is allocating hectares of land for farming, releasing grains to farmers. But having said this, when you talk about project management, you ensure that that project succeeds. If it fails, it doesn't just fail midway or quarterway. It fails from the ideation moment. I have mentioned something here, that insecurity is a huge challenge to prosperity. I saw a video where a man who has invested so much into farming was lamenting. Some herders came, moved in their cows into that cassava farm, leveled everything before morning. So what happens to such a farmer? And I doubt if we have the insurance culture in the country.
Agric insurance.
Exactly. So if we can ensure that ventures are secured onto fruitful harvesting, why not? And the population of the country keeps increasing. People are migrating from the Sahel region, so the infrastructures are overwhelmed. And that is the point we are making. So if you now go back to where we were in the First Republic, agricultural ventures largely sustained our economy, and vibrantly so.
Of course it did.
You just mentioned it, the granite pyramids in the north, we have the rubber plantation in the old Midwestern state, cocoa in the southwest,
yes,
coal in Enugu and things like that. So how can we go back to becoming a productive nation? I read recently that the president said that we become exporter of food. It's great if we can move in that direction. It also helps us to earn foreign exchange.
One wonders why we are already speaking from the end for a journey we've not even begun. So, for example, let's look at the critical area you just talked about, which is about securing farms. Farmers can't go to... we also saw what happened in Katina, where they beheaded farmers and left their heads on.
Even in Borno State.
And then we saw in Katina where they said, pay us otherwise you won't harvest your crops. Nobody has said anything about these things. And we've not arrested the people who did those things. We've not done anything about farmers who can go and harvest their crops. We've not done anything about farmers in Niger State who are now in IDP camps in Borno and other places. What we need is government intervention or government creating an environment for people to take their destinies into their own hands. Because, for example, in agriculture now, agriculture is not just for food. With the world, we know that agriculture is the raw part of the whole thing. The real business is in the agro-allied sector. Fashion, pharmaceuticals, it's all sorts. Agriculture civilization, basically. But the fact that we can't even secure farms for people to go and farm, should government also look up should we import security now?
If it becomes necessary, under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, there is a goal for partnership. So, and anything you can do to succeed legitimately, why don't you do it? And it is the responsibility of the government to secure the land. I just said it. And in the absence of security, that is why those words are crafted together. In the absence of security, welfare is threatened. And that is where we are now. You are even talking about the secondary and tertiary level of economics. Even at the primary level of producing, forget about processing, storing, exporting. At the point of producing, we are struggling. And yet we have the potentials. Yes, probably he was expressing vision. But right now, like they say, the eyeballs that will take you through the day, you notice it's good performance in the morning. This is an emergency now. Let's even leave export somewhere. Because as we are here, seemingly unserious about our agroeconomy, some countries are moving forward. Even though Russia is at war with Ukraine, Russia is solid in terms of exportation of wheat and things. In fact, some African nations went to Russia to beg for intervention. So why don't you? Israel, look at Israel. Israel has huge investment in crops production and things like that. Even countries like China that do not have the vast arable land like we have in Nigeria, they are not talking about food crisis. So can we get serious and know that government is about the people? And like I said, these are protests that are not prompted by party affiliations in politics, not prompted by religious sentiments or ethnicity.
Now, I wanted us to come to that point. Two things, right? Let me begin with the last point you made about the fact that these are protests that are not being driven by party affiliation, they're not being driven by religious affiliation, not being driven by tribe, they are not driven by any of our fault lines. I think that when a man is hungry enough, he will forget about a lot of those things. Do you see How far do you see this going from Kano to Niger, down to Osun, now to Oyo? If indeed doomsday was to come, is Nigeria ready for that doomsday?
When you talk about doomsday, how doomy in
Well,
quotes?
doomsday meaning that everybody goes on the streets and the country is in a lockdown.
I can let you know that the government has the strategic capacity to quell the doom you are talking about. And I have my precedents.
Okay.
The NSAS protest. You saw what happened at Lekki Gate, despite the denials.
But
So,
does that sound like strategy?
What?
The killing of protesters.
The government denied that they didn't kill, But the point I'm making is that when it comes to suppressing protest, I think this government has a MasterCard somewhere, which again cannot be relied upon by the government.
I think
they
know that too well.
Yes. When you look at the potentials of the nation, Nigeria should not be anywhere near listing on the register of poverty. So obviously, mismanagement has brought us to where we are. And that's why I have a very sound advice for the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. If there are people you have identified as sponsors of terrorism, as embezzlers of our resources, and you leave them to move around freely, they will drown your government and bring you to disrepute.
Last question.
Engage the law to deal with them. If there are no consequences, anything goes.
Yes. Last question. NSAS gave us an insight into how Nigerians could come together, also mobilized by something that didn't have to do with tribe or religion. They just gathered together. I mean, we saw them streaming church service on Sundays. On Fridays, we are streaming, Muslim prayers and things like that. The level of organization I went into it and professionalism was something that one wouldn't have imagined. But yet, there they were Nigerian youths at Lekki doing what they did. Hunger, I think, was an insecurity, because hunger can birth insecurity very easily. A man's first instinct is to survive. When his belly is empty, you can't. Even the vision you're talking about, vision to export export of food, he can't see into the vision. How much more buy into it? Because his vision is dizzy. He can't see. Now, just to look at something that may be good coming out of these whole protests, do you see this hunger problem perhaps being able to bring Nigerians together to a common place to say our challenges are common? Corruption is a common thing. It doesn't know tribe or religion. Disease, for example, hunger is a common thing also. So do you see this maybe having some capacity to unite, to bring Nigerians together, to speak with the common voice, to say, look, we now need reforms. We need electoral reforms. We need all sorts of things. For the first time, we're seeing people in the north and those in the south protesting over the same thing. And there's not like these are sacred cows. People are saying if we're hungry, we're hungry. Do you see this being able to horizontally bring Nigerians together?
Absolutely. You see, hunger is no respecter of persons. And the elders have a saying that the hungry man is an angry man. And it's a leveler. And I hope the government is also monitoring. I mentioned it earlier. The Sultan of Sokoto already warned that he may not be able to tame these people when they reach out, because you should not just allow that implosion, but it's up to the government to design pragmatic approaches. For instance, if we have food products anywhere, can you buy them and ensure they get to the people, not the one that you gave money to Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and they distributed it to their private accounts? So,
governors won't just share anything.
Exactly. Can you now communicate more? Expose the governors more. The federal government is not communicating.
They are not.
And I'm challenging the president on that. If you don't wink in the dark, there are things you are doing. It's the elites that are even reading that the allocation has gone up for state. Bring this to the open, challenge the governors to do what should be done. You say, if you are throwing a huge birthday party that you have announced and publicized everywhere, people are coming to eat. They are not just coming to see you well dressed. So food, and the others have a saying, if food has left, you're struggling. You have been well catered for. So I hope that the government becomes pragmatic, whether at the National Assembly level, executive level, or whatever level, to ensure that this gathering fire is not allowed to explode, because it should be a very tough issue for the government to control, and for those who are opposition minded, it will become an easy flame for the opposition to maximize, because what the Constitution says, and our audience can please just Google sections 15 and 16 of Nigerian Constitution as amended, is that our economy should be managed in a way that we have a self-reliant economy, that wealth is not concentrated in the hands of a few, and in section 16, the maximum happiness is provided, affordable food.
But all of them are in chapter 2 of the Constitution.
Exactly.
Which cannot be taken to court.
Even though you cannot take it to court, it can be tried in the public opinion court. And that is what the protests are challenging now. You see? And so it's there. And those who put that clause there that you cannot challenge it in court, a time will come that if you cannot challenge it in court, you can challenge it on the street. Because the commonwealth of this country is for the common good of the citizens, not for that of a few. I mean, we are talking about food. Have you not read about the price of cement, the price of gas? And Nigeria has the largest deposit of proven gas in Africa.
Unbelievable.
Though I've been reading recently that I think we are dealing with a flaring. So you see a nation that is so pampered, it has failed to sufficiently provide for her citizens. And when you bring it to blame game, this is something that started, I think, from the middle of the 70s. Because in the early 70s, the head of state of Nigeria, General Gowon, retired, came out to tell the world that our problem was not money, but how to spend the money. But today now, some people are spending the money privately and at the expense of the citizens. So we need to wake up. And again, I need to caution, particularly now that I read about the judgments that the case of Delegiwa should be revisited. You should look at what is going on in Mali, in Niger, and in Burkina Faso, and know that you must just connect with the citizens right now. So it's a very volatile season for Nigeria. It's not the time to be speaking big grammar across party lines. It's a time to get to action, remove your babariga, wear your t-shirt and jeans and canvas, and go to town to ensure you put smiles on the faces of angry Nigerians.
Well, that's how far we can go on the main conversation segment this morning, but that's not without thanking, first of all, Barrister Jide Ologun, who has joined us this morning on this segment at great expense. Barrister, we're grateful that you were able to make it to the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And that's it for the segment. We want to thank you also for keeping the date with us. Do well to subscribe to our page on YouTube. It's Enterprise TV 7. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.